Hello guys, myself Pramod Gaikwad and today I am going to introduce about the photonics. Right now I am doing PhD in the Electrical Engineering Department of IIT Madras under Professor Amitava Dasgupta and Professor Bobby George. This course has taught us by Professor Shivananju. The course title is Introduction to Photonics. Its code is 885500 and it's my final presentation. In this presentation we'll see how people can study and deals with the light nature. So if you are excited, then we'll see one by one. So let us begin. Optics. Optics, it is a branch of physics where we can study and deals with light. In 17th century, the scientists as doing one kind of debate. That debate is nothing but whether the light can be behaves like a particle nature or it can be behaves like a wave nature. So basis on the nature of light, the optics branch are divided in four types. We can call as the first one is a ray optics, where we can study the light nature as a particle form. So where we'll study the different concepts like refraction, reflection and total internal reflection. After that, if we our perspective is like that, so we can see the light is nothing but a wave. So in that time we'll see the some of the concepts like diffraction and interference. So those concepts are very important during the wave optics. So in electromagnetic optics, so we'll see the wave nature as well as we'll see Maxwell equations. So wave optics fails to explain about the polarization of light. So that thing we can see by using the electromagnetic concept. After that, if we see light is in the form of quanta nature, or we can call as energy packets or a photon. So that time we'll see how the light can be behave with um, as well as we'll see some of the applications of quantum optics too. In section first, we'll see ray optics and wave optics. So in this section, actually, we'll study the behavior of light as a particle nature as well as wave nature. This is the content of first section. So in this first previously at the beginning we'll see the ray nature of light. So with this consideration we'll study the reflection, reflection and total internal reflection, as well as we'll see the total internal reflection in optical fiber cable or waveguides. So after that, if we assume that the light is in the form of wave nature, that time we'll see some of the concepts like a difference between interference and diffraction, as well as to prove those things how Young's did the double slit experiment. Those also we'll see in detail, as well as what is meant by interferometer and what kind of application it has. So those things we'll see in this section. In the 17th century, Newton's also assumed that light has a particle nature. So with this assumption, we'll see how the ray aspect of light will explain about the light phenomenon. What is meant by ray? The straight line path along which light travels in homogeneous medium is called ray. And we'll see here figure A and figure B. So what is meant by reflection and what is meant by refraction? If we see the reflection, then the incident ray whenever interact with the boundary, that time it will send back into the same plane. So that phenomenon we can call as a reflection. So on the other hand, if we see the refraction in figure B, so here we can see the whenever incident ray is interact with the boundary, that time it will cross and it will transmit in another media. So this kind of concept we can call as a refraction. So these two things are very important to study the ray theory. If we right now we'll see some kind of laws of ray optics. If we so first law is a law of reflection, where we can see the angle of incidence is equal to angle of reflection. So whenever light reflects after interacting the boundary, and it will reflect in the same plane, that time the angle of incidence is equal to angle of refraction. So this is the first law. If we see the second law is nothing but Snell's law. In Snell's law, the changing of light rays direction when it passes through one media to another media, called refraction, and it's mathematically represented by n1 sin theta is equal to n2 sin theta r. So means that whenever light passes from rarer media to denser media, that time it will be bent. And so in figure B we can see how light can be bent. So that time angle of here is the angle of incidence, and here is the angle of refraction. So those things mathematically derived by the Snell's law. After that, the third law is total internal reflection. So already we see that refraction, how means the ray passing through one media to another media, it will be bent. So in figure B we can see the critical angle. Actually critical angle, the angle of refraction is almost equal to 90 degree. So that thing we can see in figure B here. So whenever incident ray is coming, that time it will be means parallel to the boundary, and it's the angle of refraction is almost 90 degree. And if we see the total internal reflection, that time whenever the incident ray is traveled through the denser media, that time again it will be reflected back. So that time we can say that there is no absorption, or we can say that total internal reflection. And that time so here we can see in detail, this is the table. So here we can see the mode of operation. So refraction when rays travel from denser media to rarer media. So here we can see that time angle of incidence is lesser than angle of refraction, while in critical mode we can see the angle of refraction is equal to 90 degree, and in total internal reflection we can see that angle of reflection is greater than angle of critical angle. So that is the condition, and in this condition only we can see the total internal reflection, and there is no absorption. So its application is optical fiber, optical waveguide. The example of third law of total internal reflection is optical fiber cable. In schematic we can see the optical fiber cable, where clad material and core materials has the different refractive index. One condition is there. So when the refractive index of clad material is lesser than compared to the refractive index of core material, that time only the total internal reflection will happen. So if that condition is satisfied, then only light can propagate through the optical fiber cable. As well as we'll see the acceptance angle. So what is meant by acceptance angle? It is the maximum angle to the fiber axis at which light ray may enter the fiber axis in order to get propagate. In the left corner we can see the maximum angle theta. So where maximum light can be entered in the fiber optical cable, and once it satisfied that N2 is lesser than N1 condition, then only it can be propagated through the fiber optic cable. So that maximum angle we can call as a acceptance angle, while the numerical aperture is the light gathering ability. So how much maximum light can be gathered across the core. So that terms we can call as a numerical aperture, and that we can calculate by using the formula also. That formula is under root n1 square minus n2 square, as well as we can calculate the acceptance angle. Theta is equal to sine inverse into numerical aperture. Basis on the shape of core and clad material, the optical fiber are classified in various types. So some of the types are here: step index fiber, or we can call as a multimode fiber, threaded index multimode fiber, or a single mode fiber. So in single mode we can see the core material, the core's dimension is very small diameter is there. So there we can only transmit only single wave. So it's actually used for long haul communication, as well as we'll see the basis on the propagation mode. We'll see the multimode threaded index and step index multimode fiber. If we doing the optical communication via cable, that time we will see lot of signal loss, because why that thing is happen, because it was unable to transmit the high frequency signal. So that time we'll see lot of losses across that cable. So that problem we have to overcome. So that problem overcome by using the waveguide, because waveguide is basically designed and developed to transmit the high frequency signal. So it can transmit the signal in around gigahertz range. So basis on the shape, that optical waveguide are classified in various types. First one is rectangular. We can see there the core and clad material is look like a rectangular shape, while after that we'll see the core material is like a circular shape, elliptical shape, and last one is the double ridged shape. So all the waveguides having their own advantages, while on the other hand some of the people assume that light can be behaved as a wave nature. In 17th century, Huygens first time proposed that light can be behaved like a wave nature, and these things we can study it by using reflection and refraction. So if we see the reflection, the angle of incidence wave is equal to angle of reflected wave, and that thing we'll see in the figure A. So whenever incidence wave interacts with the boundary, then it will be reflect in the same plane, and that time the angle of incidence is equal to angle of reflection. So that one is the first law. If we see the second law, the refraction law, in this law we'll see that when light waves traveling from one media to other media, then their propagation speed changes. We can see that the incidence waves when coming from the rarer media to denser media, that time its propagation speed will be changed, as well as we see the bending behavior also. In example, it can be clarifies that whenever we dip the pencil into the water, due to changing speed of light in glass media or water media, we'll see the bending behavior of pencil, and this thing we can calculate by using the formula. The refractive index n is equal to C1 vacuum divided by C2 medium, and the speed of light we know that 3 multiplied by 10 raised to 8 meter per second. With the assumption of wave nature of light, we can prove the interference and diffraction term. So what is meant by interference and what is meant by diffraction, we can see in this slide. So The figure A, we can see their man is standing inside the swimming pool. There is some fringing pattern is there. So those kind of patterns we can call as interference. So whenever crest and trough of two waves combine with each other, and they will produce the resultant wave, so that time we'll see the amplitude of that wave will be increased. So those kind of interferences we can call as constructive interference. Whenever those two waves are out of phase and those are combined with each other, that time we'll see there is a no means those waves are cancel each other. So that kind of interference we can call as a destructive interference. Well, we see on the other hand, in the figure B, there is the diffraction pattern. So that pattern is made by laser beam source. So what is meant by diffraction? Actually, diffraction pattern is nothing but the bending behavior of light. So in right side we can see there is the two slits. Whenever light passing through the those two slits, then it will be bent. So bending of waves we can call as a diffraction. While if we see the ray optics, when ray behavior of light nature, so whenever it passes through the two slits, it can't bend. So the ray optics are unable to prove the diffraction pattern, while the wave nature can prove that diffraction is possible by using the wave behavior. In this schematic we can see that Young's, with his experiment, how can be explained the interference and diffraction things. So with his in this experiment we can see there is some slit is there, and H1 H2 are the holes generated by those slits. So whenever light is coming from the light source and it passes through those holes, then it will be bent. So that thing we can call as a diffraction, and it will generate some angle and it will propagate towards the screen. So on this screen we can see dark and bright spot. Those dark and bright spot we can call as constructive and destructive interference. So if two waves having the same phase, and if they will combine with each other, that time they will generate the constructive interference. While if two waves having the out of phase, and if they will combine, that time we see the destructive interference. Actually, interferometers are the tools or devices that extract the information from the interference pattern, and they are widely used in science and industry for the measurement of microscopic displacements, and to study the refractive index changes and surface irregularities. So basis on the arrangement, it can be classified as a Mach-Zehnder interferometer, Michelson interferometer, Sagnac interferometer, and Fabry-Perot interferometer. For example, in figure A we can see the Mach-Zehnder interferometer arrangement, and figure B is the Michelson interferometer arrangement. In figure A if we see the Mach-Zehnder interferometer, where we can see the light generated by the light source, whenever it's whenever it's incident on the beam splitter, it will be divided in two parts. So mirror first, it will be reflected that first path, while the mirror second, again it will be reflected towards the second beam splitter, and that second beam splitter again some portion will be reflected, some portion it will be transmitted. So those things will be detected by detector first and detector second. Those both detectors are nothing but the photodiodes. So both if we do the data processing, then we'll get some interference pattern. So those patterns are useful for to study the gas sensing and some detecting the monochromatic wavelength and all of those things. If we see the Michelson interferometer, where we can see how the interference pattern will be generated by using the single beam. So whenever light is coming from the light source, it will interact with the beam splitter and it will be divided in two parts. Some portion is be reflected towards mirror 1 and some portion directly uh, refracted towards the mirror 2. So again that whenever it interacts that first path to the mirror 1, it will some portion reflect back, and that portion uh, again we can see directly coming towards the screen. So as well as the portion reflected back by mirror 2 also, after striking to the beam splitter, some portion will be reflected. So those uh, both portion whenever combined, then those things will making the some interference pattern, and those patterns will see on the screen. And this kind of interferometers are used to sense the different gases, as well as we can use to study the wavelength, or we can determine the monochromatic wavelength and all of those things. In section 2, we can assume that light can be behaved as a electromagnetic nature, as well as light can be behaved as a quantum nature. So we'll see what kind of advantages is there or what kind of limitations is there. These are the contents of section 2. In part first, we can see the electromagnetic behavior of light, where we can study the polarization of light, as well as we'll study the transverse electromagnetic properties of waves. While on the other part, we can see how light can behave like as a quantum nature. We can call as a photon too. It having certain kind of important applications too. The well-known application is laser. To understand the working mechanism, before that we have to understand some kind of concepts such as absorption, spontaneous emission and stimulated emission, and finally we can see how lasers can work, as well as what kind of types it have. So we know that the Maxwell is very popular for his 4 equations. Those equations are electromagnetic equations, and first time he derived in terms of math those equation. Those equation actually reflects the behavior of light in terms of electromagnetic nature. Light is in the interaction of electric and magnetic field when both waves are combined with each other, and if they are perpendicular to each other, that time whole combination we can call as electromagnetic wave. In schematic, we can see that the light colored rays we can call as an electric field, while the blue colored lines we can call as a magnetic field. And whenever if combine those waves together such a way that each wave having the perpendicular to the other, so that whole package we can call as electromagnetic wave. At the right corner we can see there is the mathematical equation of wave equation, as well as we can calculate the speed of light by using the equation. Here we can see it, and at the middle there is the 4 different equations. Those equations we can call as a Maxwell equation, and those equations with it's very important to understand the behavior of light in terms of electric field as well as magnetic field. What is meant by transverse electromagnetic waves? So it is the movement of the particle in the wave is perpendicular to the direction motion of the wave. If we throw any stone in the river, that time some certain kind of ripples we saw on the top surface of water, those things we can call as a transverse wave. Sound waves also we can call as a transverse wave. In the schematic we can see the pictorial representation of electromagnetic waves. So it is very important to convert in terms of wavefronts, so we can study its behavior. So here we can see E, H and K are naturally orthogonal planes. Before understanding the polarization concept of light, we have to know that what is meant by unpolarized wave or what is meant by polarized wave. Unpolarized wave, we can call those waves whose are vibrating in more than one plane. While on the other hand, the polarized wave, we can call those waves whose are vibrating in only single plane. So that is the key difference between the two waves. And the process of transforming unpolarized light into polarized light, we can call as a polarization. In schematic, we can see the polarization of light. There we can see the light coming from the light source. Initially, it is in the form of unpolarized nature. Whenever it transmits through the polarizer, then that time the light will be vibrate only in the single plane. So we can call as a polarized light also. So the whole process we can call as a polarization. And the basis of rotation, we can classify the polarization such as linear polarization, circular polarization and elliptical polarization. And this concept we can use in various applications, such as we can use in infrared spectroscopy, as well as we can use to see the three-dimensional movies and reduce the glare of sunglasses, as well as we can use it in plastic industries too. So here we can see the three different types of polarization. At the beginning, we'll see the linear polarization, where we can see the electric field of light is confined to a single plane and it will be vibrate along the direction of propagation. Means it can be vibrate only on the single plane. So we can call as a linear polarization. While the circular polarization and elliptical polarization has the only one difference. That difference is nothing but the phase difference. In circular polarization, the phase difference of electric field and magnetic field is around pi by 2, while it can't see in the elliptical polarization. After studying the ray optics and wave optics and electromagnetic optics, one kind of important assumption is that light can be behaves like a quantum nature or photon nature. So in this assumption, light is emitted like a form of quanta, or we can call as an energy packet X. It is not in the form of continuous nature. So the whole credits goes to the understanding that kind of behavior. This goes to these two scientists. One of them is Max Planck and another one is Albert Einstein. So the well-known application of that quantum nature or quantum behavior of light, that is laser. So laser is a light amplification of stimulated emission of radiation, and this principle first time invented by Charles Towson, Nikolai Bosso and Alexander Prokop. And to making that laser, they will get the Nobel Prize in 1964. In the figure first, we can see the laser structure. The component 3 we can say as a fully reflected mirror, while the fourth one is the partially reflected mirror. And the component 1 is the active medium, where we can put the different materials, while the component 2 is the we can do the external pumping, so we can get the or achieve the population inversion condition during lasing action. After completion of lasing action, the emission of photon will be see at the output of beam at component 5, and the whole energy or what kind of output nature or what colored output nature we can calculate by using the formula is equal to hc divided by lambda. H is nothing but the Planck's constant, c is the light of speed in space, while the lambda is the wavelength of light. So in figure B we can see the working mechanism of laser. So whenever due to external pumping, the atoms in ground state will absorb the energy and they will shift it towards the excited state, and once they went in excited state, their lifetime will be very short. They are fallen down to the metastable state. In metastable state, their lifetime is longer compared to the excited state. It's around 10 raised to minus 3 second. So whenever population inversion condition is achieved by the laser, so the atoms in the metastable state are fallen down to the ground state. So whenever they are fallen down, that time they will emit the photon, and that emission of photon is responsible for the secondary emission of photon, and that the photonic multiplication action was happened, and suddenly that intensity of light will be increasing, and at the one time it will be suddenly come out of from the partially reflected mirror. So we can see the output beam, uh, 5 component in the figure A. So before understanding the laser concepts, it's very important to understand some of the concepts like absorption, spontaneous emission, and stimulated emission. In the first case, in figure A, we can see the absorption phenomenon. Whenever any external means the atoms in the ground state absorb the light energy from the external photon, and once they absorb the energy, they will shift it in the higher energy level. So likewise in spontaneous emission, uh, automatically atoms are fallen down from the upper energy level to the lower energy level. At that moment they will emit the photon. That kind of concept we can call as spontaneous emission. While in figure C we can see that whenever external pumping if we did, uh, that time the atoms in the upper energy level, they will get the energy and they will fall down to the ground state level, and at that moment they will emit the 2 photons. So that kind of concepts we can call as a stimulated emission of photon. So the one example of absorption is whenever in schematic we can see that means whenever incidence radiation is coming and it will be absorbed by sample, they will modulate their internal property, and at the output we can see that the transmitted radiation intensity is lesser compared to the incident radiation of photon. So that thing we can see here by graph also. There is the 2 different peaks are there. So those peaks reflect that means there is a absorption happen, and this one is the quartz cuvette, where we can hold the sample. So that quartz cuvette we can fix in the absorption spectroscopy. At the figure A is showing the schematic of absorption spectroscopy. Whenever light coming from the deuterium lamp, it is not in monochromatic nature. It's very important to convert as a monochromatic nature. That function has been done by monochromator, and beam splitter it splitted that beam in 2 different paths. One path is propagating through the sample, and another path propagating through the reference sample. So both data are combined and will do the data processing. After that we'll get some standard profile, so that with that profile we can understand the behavior of different kind of materials. So fluorescence is the phenomena that a material emits light at one wavelength when you illuminate it at another. So this kind of spectroscopy is used to improve the signal to noise ratio, and this kind of spectroscopy are more sensitive than ultraviolet spectroscopy. So with the using the fluorescence concept, people are making the fluorescence spectroscopy, and this kind of spectroscopy can be used to detect the cancer and other health related issues. So in figure B is the working mechanism, where we can see the 3 different energy levels and excitation of the emission of one light as the responsible of emission of other light. This is the statistical properties of light. Here we can see the difference between the ordinary light and laser beam. So the output of laser beam, if we see, there is the coherence nature is there, while the ordinary lights is not in coherence nature. As well as we'll see in ordinary light, it can be generate the different wavelengths, while on the other hand, laser beam can be generate only one wavelength. So that is the beauty of laser. Light amplification is whenever in stimulated emission, the external if we do external stimulation, that time the atoms in the upper energy level absorb the energy and they will fallen down towards the into the lower energy level. That time they will emit the two photons, and those photons are also responsible for the secondary emission of photon. That photonic multiplication action happened, and we can see in the figure B the light amplification process. Similarly, the laser pumping action is also very important to achieve the population inversion condition. And here we can see in schematic the active materials rod is there and flash lamp is there. Flash lamp is used to give the initial, we have to give the pumping of atoms. So whenever we give the pumping, that time the atoms in ground state level, they will absorb the energy and they will shift it in the excited state. So we can give the pumping by using various methods. One of them is optically, electrically, or chemically. So population inversion and metastable state. So when population inversion condition is achieved, we can call, so whenever the number of atoms in the higher energy level or upper energy level is the more compared to the lower energy level, that time we can say that population inversion condition is achieved. While the metastable state is the state where atoms are staying longer times. In schematic we can see here. This state we can call as a metastable state. The 3-level pumping system. So before in schematic, if we see A is the before population inversion condition is achieved. So how the atoms behave, that we can see. So if we do the pumping, that time atoms gain the energy and it will shifted in the excited state. So E3 is the excited state and E1 is the ground state, while E2 is the metastable state. After population inversion condition, we can see the atoms in the metastable state is higher compared to the ground state. So that time what happened, the atoms in the metastable state are fallen down in the ground state and they will emit the photon, and the first photon is the responsible for the secondary emission of photon. So that photonic multiplication action will be happen, and as a result we'll get the laser beam. So it's the disadvantage is actually it's require more pumping power to excite the atoms from the ground state to the higher state. Here we can see the detailed function of ruby laser. In schematic we can see there is the pink color rod. That rod we can call as a ruby rod. That rod made up by using the material of chromium and aluminum trioxide. And another that wounded kind of shape is there. That shape we can call as a flash lamp. That flash lamp is used to give the pumping. In figure B is the energy level of ruby laser. So what happen actually, whenever if we give the pumping to the atom, that time the lower energy level atoms are shifted in the excited energy level. So we can see here from first level to the third level atoms are shifted, and after over their lifetime they will fallen down to the metastable state. Whenever they are fallen down into the metastable state, then that time their lifetime will be higher compared to the excited state. So once the population inversion condition is achieved, that time some of the atoms from the metastable state are fallen down to the ground state, and they will emit the photon, and that emission of photon is also responsible for the secondary emission of photon. So due to that photonic multiplication action, here we can see the laser output beam. So this output beam we can get around at the wavelength of 694.3 nanometer, and this laser invented by T.H. Meinman in 1960. Here we can see the power level pumping system. So actually by using 3-level pumping system, it requires lot of power to excite the atoms from the ground state to the excited state. So that problem we can overcome by using this 4-level pumping system. We can see means initially if we give the pumping, that time the atoms from the ground state energy level are going into the excited state, and when they will fallen down, they will not fallen down to the metastable state. Some of the atoms are fallen down to the normal state. So if we see, once the population inversion condition achieved in between the energy level of E3 and E2, so that time we'll see the lasing action. So the 4-level pumping system example is neodymium doped yttrium vandet laser. So here this type of laser is solid type of laser, and its active system is form of 5VO4 doped Nd due to the yttrium ions get replaced by neodymium ions. And the optical resonator, if we see in the schematic, that is crystal is placed between the two mirrors. One is a fully reflected mirror and another one is partially reflected mirror. The nature of output is continuous or pulse, or we can see the wavelength output is 1064 nanometer, and that output we can get the energy in the between of the energy level in the between of E3 and E2. The working principle is when optical pumping provided to device that neodymium ion gets rise to the higher energy level, and their transition produce a laser beam. So actually it happened due to the neodymium ion. So whole role are playing those ions. In section 3, I will introduce about the optoelectronic devices. Here we'll see different types of optoelectronic devices. So these are the contents of section 3, where we can see different types of photodetectors such as vacuum photodiodes, phototubes, etc. As well as we'll see what is meant by optical modulator, or what type it has, or how it can be worked, as well as we'll see how phase modulator will be worked, as well as intensity modulator will be worked. In 21st century, semiconductor materials are playing vital role. As a result, we can see the electronic and photonic industries are booming in the market. So the three scientists Shockley, Bardeen and Brattain had invented the first amplification device in the 1947. In figure A, we can see the energy gaps of material. Basis on the energy gaps, the materials are classified in three types: insulator, semiconductor and conductor. In semiconductor, the energy band gap is compared to insulator, it's very small. So we can modulate it sometimes as a conductor, as well as we can, as per our requirement, we can make it as an insulator. So what is meant by direct band gap and indirect band gap? So if the crystal movement of electrons and holes is the same in both the conduction band and wireless band, that kind of band gap we can call as a direct band gap. And its example is indium arsenide and gallium arsenide. While the indirect band gap, this maximum energy of the valence band occurs at different value of movement to the minimum in the conduction band. We can see the indirect band gap in figure B. So the example of indirect band gap is silicon and germanium. Before going towards optoelectronic devices, uh, to understand some kind of concepts are very important. Those concepts are absorption, spontaneous emission and stimulated emission. In figure A is showing the absorption phenomena. When light is coming from the external source, that time the atoms from the lower energy level absorb that energy and it will shift it towards the higher energy level. So while in the spontaneous emission we can see there, so automatically the atoms from the higher energy level are fallen down to the lower energy level, and that time they will emit the photon. So this kind of concepts we can use in LED application, because we can see the recombination of electron hole pair. While in stimulated emission, some external source are required to fallen the atom from the higher energy level to the lower energy level. As a result, we will see the two photons at the output. So one photon is the responsible for the secondary emission of photons. So those kind of emissions will used in laser application. The first application of optoelectronic device is LED. Actually, LED is a light emitting diode. It is a semiconductor device that emits light when an electric current flows through it. So here we can see the symbol, circuit, LED image and the detailed structure of LED. In detailed structure figure D, we can see there the epoxy layers are there. Actually it's a cup type of shape is there. So why that material is also very important, because we have to take care that so we can very less amount of light absorb that material. So those things are very important, as well as directivity is also important. We'll see there anode and cathode is also there. So actually LED we have to connect in forward. If we see the working principle of LED, then the LEDs work on the principle of electroluminescence concept. On passing a current through the diode, minority charge carriers and majority charge carriers recombine at the junction. On recombination, energy is released in the form of photon. As the forward voltage increases, the intensity of light increases and reaches a maximum. In schematic, we can see there is a p-type of material and n-type of material. P-type material connected to the positive terminal of battery, while the n-type of material is connected to the negative terminal of the battery. Whenever the recombination process happen across the junction, that time the light will be emit in the nature of photon, and this kind of LED will be applicable in optical communication as well as alarm and security systems. The main uses, it finds uses in many areas because it has a long lasting capability, lower power requirements, as well as it having the very fast switching capability. That's what it can be used in displays, TV backlights, those kind of application we can see. In this slide we can see the table where there are the different materials as well as corresponding wavelengths are there. So if we change the energy of any material, that time automatically its wavelength also change. So that we can calculate by using the formula is equal to h mu is equal to hc divided by lambda. Or in the table we can see there are the different materials as well as their means if we change the material, that time the corresponding wavelengths are also changed, because that happened due to the energy gap of the material. What is mean by photodetectors? Actually photodetectors are detecting the light, and that light they will convert in the form of electric nature, as that electric nature either it is in the form of current or voltage. So photodetectors we can call as a photosensors too. So photoelectric effect. The photoelectric effect is the phenomenon in which electrons are ejected from the surface of metal when light is incident on it. These ejection electrons called photoelectrons. And what is mean by photoemission process? The process through which photoelectrons are ejected from the surface of the metal due to the action of light is commonly referred to as a photoemission. So here we can see the schematic of photoelectric effect. Whenever incident light is fallen on the metal surface, that time the electrons are ejected through the surface. Those electrons we can call as a photoelectrons. In schematic A we can clearly see that thing, and those ejected electrons are collected by the positive terminals, and if we connected any emitter across the two terminals, then we'll get the uh, current. So that thing you can see in the photodetector schematic. So the minimum amount of required to remove an electrons from the metal is called the threshold energy. So threshold energy also very important. So its application we can means these photodetectors we can use in XPS spectroscopy. Basis on the working principle, photodetectors are classified in two types. One of them is photoelectric photodetector and another one is thermal detectors. In figure A we can see the photoelectric detector, where this detector is working on the principle of photoelectric effect. We can see means whenever any external energy source is there, so that time the atoms in the ground state they are absorbing that energy and they will shift it in the conduction band. So that's what they are available for the conduction. On the right side of the figure A we can see there is the schematic. So whenever means any radiation is fallen down to the metal surface, that time they will ejected the electrons from that metal surface, and those electrons are photoelectrons are collected by the positive terminal, and if we connected any emitter in between those two connector, so we'll get the deflection in that emitter. So we can say that the conduction is happened in that detector. So while in the other, if we see the thermal detector, it is the responsible for the conduction. We can see in figure B, due to heat the atoms in the ground state energy level are shifted in the conduction band, and we'll see the conductivity difference. So its application is imaging or thermal array detector. So the energy of photon is equal to energy of needed to remove an electron plus kinetic energy, that we can describe by using the formula H mu is equal to W plus E. Where W is the work function. So the first type of detector is the vacuum photodiode or phototube. These phototubes are gas filled or vacuum tubes which can be used as a photodetectors, and these phototubes are working on the principle of photoelectric effect. A current is generated that is proportional to the intensity of light, and electrons are emitted from the surface of photosensitive cathode. If we see the figure A, there is the vacuum photodiode. If any incident light is fallen on the metal surface, that time the electrons are ejected through that surface, and those electrons are collected by the anode terminal. If we connected any emitter across those photoanode and photocathode, then we'll see there is some kind of deflection is there. So in figure B we can see the incident light means whenever strikes the photocathode material, that time the electrons are ejected through the metal surface. So those electrons again are responsible for to eject the other electrons. So that multiplication action we can see there. So they are transferring their energy and they are helping to removing the other electrons. So that multiplication action is happened. Before understanding the photoconductors, we have to know the phenomena of photoconductivity. Photoconductivity is the phenomena in which electrical current is generated in material under light radiation. In schematic A, we can see that whenever light radiation is coming on the top surface of electrodes, that time the atoms in the valence band are shifted in the conduction band. They will absorb the energy and they will shift in the conduction band. Once they will shift in the conduction band, then those atoms are available for the uh, conduction purpose. So as a result, the resistance of that material will be changed. We can see the symbol of photoconductors too here. Here we can see the electric circuit of photoconductors in figure A and the schematic of zinc oxide photoconductor in figure B. If we see the figure A, the photoconductors are connected in reverse bias because B requires the wide depletion region. If we means having the wide if we increase the depletion region, then we'll get the higher current. So that's what we are connecting in the reverse bias mode. In schematic of zinc oxide photoconductors, we can see there we can calculate the change in conductivity by using the means right side corner formulas are there. We can calculate those. Photodiode or semiconductor diode which when exposed to light generate a potential difference or changes its electrical resistance. Actually photodiode are connected in reverse bias mode. So in figure A we can see the symbol of photodiode. In figure B we can see the electric circuit for photoconductors. It's connected in reverse bias mode. The p-type of semiconductor material is connected to the n-type of negative terminal of battery, while the n-type of semiconductor material is connected to the positive terminal of battery. This combination we can call as a reverse bias mode. Whenever any incident radiation is coming on the junction of PN diode, that time that immobile ions absorbing the energy from external radiation and they will available for the conduction. So the wider depletion region we can get the wider more current. So that's what we are connecting in reverse bias. We can see the in figure C the IV profile of photodiode. So its application is absorption and emission spectroscopy, and the basic materials are silicon, germanium and indium gas. So the basic we can classify it in various types. This photodiode, the simple one is PN photodiode, pin photodiode and avalanche photodiode. We'll see the first simple photodiode, that one is PN photodiode. So the p-type is connected to the negative terminal, while the n-type of semiconductor material is connected to the positive terminal battery. That combination we can call as a reverse bias. Whenever incidence radiation is coming up on the junction, that time the immobile ions are absorbing that energy and they will goes from the valence band to the conduction band. As a result, carriers generated across the depletion region. We'll see in the figure the working mechanism of photodiode. But the problem is we'll get the very smaller depletion region in this kind of photodiode. The second type of photodiode is a pin photodiode. A pin diode is a diode with a wide region of intrinsic semiconductor. Actually, we did some additional arrangement in this diode. We are adding intrinsic semiconductor region sandwiching in between the P and N material, so we can get the wider depletion region. That is the advantage of this kind of diode. So it's similarly working like a PN diode. So whenever any incidence radiation is coming, as a result we can generate the carriers across the junction. The fact is that due to intrinsic region we'll get the wider depletion region. So wider is the depletion region, so we'll get the more current at the output. So its application is X-ray spectroscopy. Actually the pin diode consists of heavily doped P and N region separated by intrinsic region. If it is reverse bias, the pin diode acts like a nearly constant capacitor, and when forward bias it acts like a current control. Avalanche photodiode is the third type of photodiode. Avalanche diode are very similar in design to the silicon pin diode. The depletion layer in an avalanche photodiode is relatively thin, and if we see the operation, very high reverse bias voltage if we applied around 2500 volts across the device. As the bias voltage is increased, the electrons generated in the p layer continues to increase in the energy as they undergo multiple collision with the crystalline silicon lattice. This avalanche of electrons eventually result in the electron multiplication that is analogous to the process occurring in one of the uh, diodes of we can call as a photomultiplier too. So it's action like a photomultiplier too. So the advantage of this kind of diode is they are compact and immune to magnetic field. It requires very low current for difficult to overload, having high quantum efficiency. That one is the main advantage of this kind of photodiode. And we can replace it's an alternative option for avalanche photodiode. The material used for this kind of photodiode is indium gallium arsenide, indium phosphide. To getting the better performance by photodetectors, we have to consider some of the parameters such as gain, sensitivity, efficiency, fast response time, signal to noise ratio, and high reliability, and as well as cost. If we consider those parameters, then definitely we'll get a good product. So if we see the quantum efficiency, what is meant by quantum efficiency? Probability that a single photon incidence the device will generate a photocarrier electron hole pair. So that is actually the ability of single photon, how much carriers can be generated. So it can be calculated by using the formula. We can see eta is equal to number of electron hole pair generated and collected divided by number of incident photons. As well as we'll see the definition of responsivity also. It is a measure of optical to electrical conversion efficiency of photodetectors and is usually expressed by the value of photocurrent milliampere generated by each milliwatt of optical signal. We can see the formula of responsivity also, and we can see the gain also, means it's a the combination of input and output we can see by using the gain. What is mean by optical modulator? So an optical modulator is a device which is used to modulate a beam of light. We can modulate that beam with various parameters such as phase, intensity, wavelength, position, and polarization. In figure A, we can see the schematic of optical modulator. In that modulator, we can see the amplitude of input wave is modulated at the output. It has a different types of modulators. So absorptive modulator, refractive modulator has also different kind of modulators. Basis on the principle, we can classify it in electro-optic modulator, acoustic modulator. Electro-optic modulator again classified in different modulators like a phase modulator, amplitude or intensity modulator. So we'll see all those things, all those modulators detailed. The first modulator is acoustic optic modulator. So its basis, the working mechanism is based on acoustic optic effect. So what is meant by acoustic optic effect? Actually, the sound waves can be the control the light properties. If you see in the schematic, the yellow colored one is the crystal, so it has a certain kind of frequency. If we pass any light through that crystal, that time based on the refractive index of that crystal, we can shift the light. So the transmitted light's angle we can shift if we change the refractive index of that crystal. And that crystal, the common materials are tritium oxide or crystalline quartz, infrared. For a particular application, we can use the indium phosphide and germanium. So working principle of acoustic modulator, we know that the law of refraction, when a light passing through from one media to other media, that time it will be bent. So yeah, we did such a kind of arrangement where the transparent crystal is there, and that transparent crystal is vibrating due to external voltage. So that vibration we can call as a sound waves. So whenever we are changing the electric voltage across that crystal, the sound waves will be changed. As a result, we can see the change in the refractive index of that transparent material. And if we pass any light through that transparent material, then as per the law of refraction, that light will be bent. So whenever that sound waves will be changed, as a result we'll see the um, radiation shift too. And as well as we can see the Bragg's condition also. If we satisfied that sin theta is equal to lambda by 2d, then we'll see the diffraction patterns. So in figure B we can see the optic acousto-optic modulator switch. So if we pass any light through that transparent crystal, so as per the change in refractive index, we can see the output also shifting the light out. The electro-optic modulators are based on the electro-optic effect. What is meant by electro-optic effect? The refractive index of a material can be modified with respect to applied electric field. While in electroacoustic field, so the sound waves are the responsible for the change in refractive index. So that is the key difference between the two effects. Here in schematic A, we can see that there is some electric field lines, and we are passing the lights through those electric field lines. So certain kind of materials are available. If we applying the electric signals to them, then their refractive index will be changed, or they are starting to vibrate. So that idea we are going to implement in the electro-optic modulators. So we can control the refractive index by applying the external voltage, or we can control by using the external signal. So that in figure B we can see the optical modulator by using the electro-optic effect. Here we can see the phase modulator by using the Mach-Zehnder interferometer. In schematic we can see at the branch first we are putting the electro-optic modulator, while in the branch 2 we can put the reference signal. So whenever if we changing the voltage across the electro-optic modulator, that time we can modify the refractive index. So as a result we can see the change in intensity at the output. So we can calculate by using the formula to these things, as well as we can see the intensity modulator also. Similarly, at the one branch, if we put the acousto electro-optic modulator, and another one is the reference signal, so we can see the applied voltage as the function of intensity modulation. Invention always change the world. At the finally we can see quantum photonic processor in this image. So nowadays people are looking new and new things. So people are trying to develop some processor by using photonic technologies, and by using various electronic technologies. So we have to always think new things, or we have to ready to upgrade ourselves. And so that's what it's very important to gain the knowledge from various sources and implement in the various laboratories. So thanks a lot. Everyone should be enjoy the photonic world. Goodbye.